But I have a question I like to ask audiences, and that is, we're here amongst friends, you can let your hair down. How many of you want to be filthy, stinking rich? Raise your hands. Oh, you guys are no fair, you've heard this before. How many of you want to be poor? Actually, believe it or not, I often get a few hands. Okay, you always up there who have this monastic view of the purity of poverty. How many people don't really need to be filthy, stinking rich, but just want to have enough money to be comfortable, take care of their families, their needs? You know, you're not all about money, you just want to be okay. Well, that's interesting. That's almost as many as the filthy, stinking rich, greedy bastards here. So I want to talk about money, but there's no point in me talking about money if you have a negative attitude about money. If you think it is filthy and stinking to be rich. Right? And what's the point? I might as well try to sell you a load of shit. It's filthy and stinky. So, I would like to offer moral and practical arguments for why becoming wealthy is a good and not an undesirable thing that maybe, you know, if you hold your nose, you might do. So, just to begin with, Ayn Rand makes the argument of the virtue of selfishness. So, who here has not heard of or encountered the ideas of Ayn Rand? Anybody? You can raise your hand, no shame, it's all right. Okay, we're just trying to establish a shared context. If you've heard these ideas or read the books, then at least you know the argument whether you agree with it or not. So she makes the argument about the virtue of selfishness. If you buy this argument, then I don't need to say anything else, I'm done. Right? If selfishness is a virtue, if the maximization of value for the individual, if the rational pursuit of your own interest is in fact a moral good, that is the argument. Why do you have a negative attitude about money? Money is just the outcome of maximizing your value, or a visible, measurable outcome of maximizing your value.
Depends what you mean, money. We just spoke about fiat.
I think for the current context, our shared feeling, vague as it is close enough. But we can come back to that. It's actually a good question. So, if that having been established, there really is the moral argument isn't really a question. I think what happens is we have more of an emotional barrier. It's kind of icky, is the technical term in America, to be money grubbing and to care about money. And those people who all they care about is money, they wear black and have long curly mustaches, and they tie girls to the railroad tracks on the weekends for fun. And this is the view, Oil Can Harry, of those evil rich people. And you see the signs that we saw, I remember in 2008, when the crisis was hitting and all the people were being affected, and there were people who had signs in New York on Wall Street, and it said, "Jump, you bastards." My favorite, though, was this is really neither relevant, but I'll just say it because I love it, was the mock-up Economist cover page that was circulated on the internet. It was the red masthead and a totally black cover page, and it just said in giant, like 78-point font, "Oh fuck." But the point at the moment is, there were these signs, you know, "Jump, you bastards," and there is this resentment against money. Well, why is that? I actually think that there's a historical reason for this. Before the modern times, when it was possible for people to make lots of money simply by delivering value to many customers, capitalism run rampant and enabling individuals to just amass fortunes by creating value. Who had the money? The aristocracy. It was the kings and all the royal bastards, literally, who had the money. These were generally not very nice people. In economics terms, they had what incentive to be nice? I'm the king. It's good to be the king. This boy, come here. Right? They had no incentive to be nice. And they weren't. So, for centuries, millennia, we had a conflation of wealth and coercive power that was not admirable, and people suffered. And there's a cultural baggage in history all around the world. I think you could say the same thing about wealthy people in India or China or whatever. They weren't known for being sweethearts. So there's a reason why we have this, and it affects us emotionally. We have these attitudes that make us negative about money. So we need to overcome these attitudes. And I have a personal story I tell about this. When I was in the nonprofit sector, and I used to help raise money for ISIL, and I worked with other nonprofit organizations before, and it was my job to go around and ask people for money. And I was, for a while, president of what was the Henry Hazlitt Foundation. I created freemarket.net. And in Chicago, there were a half a dozen libertarian millionaires that I would go and have lunch with and ask for money from time to time. And as I got to know these gentlemen, I realized that none of them wore black, except on occasion, you know, shoes. And none of them tied girls to the railroad tracks on the weekend just for fun. Actually, they were all interesting, really smart, cool guys. I liked them. And interesting enough, of the 6 of them, 5 of them were completely self-made. They saw something, some pattern in the market. One guy did that, saw it, developed a mathematical model, and sold it to Goldman Sachs for $125 million. Another guy was one of the first evil entrepreneurs to go to China and set up sweatshops and make Reeboks. But he was fascinated with China. And each one of these guys had a story like this, where there was something that fascinated them. And they got into it. And I think this is essential for successful entrepreneurship. It's not enough just to have a business plan or something. You have to have a personal fascination and interest to overcome the obstacles that you always encounter in business. And so this was really interesting. And I realized that I had this attitude. Oh, sorry, one more thing. I also noticed in looking at these really rich people that they, A, were not bad or mean or nasty or ugly in any kind of way. I also noticed that they were serious about money. That doesn't mean they obsessed about it, didn't care about anything else. It means that they thought about it, they used it, they invested it, they knew what the interest rates were, and they knew what the markets were doing. They paid attention. And the people who just said, well, enough is enough for me. I don't need to be rich. I just want to be comfortable. I want to be able to take care of my children. They did not pay attention. And they also were not that comfortable. The people who said, well, I don't need to be rich. I just, you know, there are more important things than money. I just want enough to take care of my family. They didn't have enough to take care of their families. Maybe they had enough to eat, but they didn't have enough for college or whatever other things, goals they had for their families. So it was really a stark contrast in my mind. The people who had a negative attitude about money didn't have any. What a surprise! Law of attraction, right? And the people who were serious about money and had a positive attitude and believed that they could and would make money did. This was absolutely black and white. And I realized that I had a bad attitude about money. I realized that this, well, you know, there's more important things. I'm saving the world and I'm doing all these noble things. It was very rewarding spiritually and so on. But it was not financially. And it was stressful to worry about whether you're going to be able to feed your kids next week. And this was my constant state when I was in the very non-profitable nonprofit sector. And so I decided, well, you know what? These guys that have all this money, maybe this is kind of arrogant, but it's true. I said, you know what? They're not smarter than I am. There's nothing about these guys and what they did that I couldn't do. Or I don't know anything about this world, but I can learn it. I'm not stupid. I can do this. So I decided that I was going to get serious about money. I didn't know anything about finance. I had never studied any kind of financial course, no Harvard MBA for me, none of this. I just decided, I made a decision. I'm going to change my attitude about money. And I'm going to learn. And I'm going to become rich. I set it as a goal to myself. I'm going to become rich. And it was about 2-3 months later that I got the job offer to work in my current job with Casey Research. And I'm not really here to brag about how rich I am, and I would say I'm still a work in process. I haven't quite achieved my goal yet, but I will say that before I started working for KC Research, my job was to go around and ask people for money for causes that I believed in, like ISIL or whatever. Now, when I see something that I want to do or want to see done, I write the check. And so there are many of you here who know about the Liberty Camps or have seen them or participated in them. There's a Liberty Camp in Lithuania that I run that It has actually now become almost self-funding. There's enough value in it that the students are paying for their own costs. We had about 90 of them do that this year. I think that's really cool. But I made it happen, and I started it happening just by writing the check. I didn't ask anybody for the money. Actually, Virgus told me in 2008, we don't have any money. I said, yeah. And it's a lot more fun, I'll tell you, to write the check than to ask for the check. So here we come back to the arguments about money. I would say that it is a positive good to have the money to do things. Money is power. Does anybody want to disagree with that assertion? Okay? And I would say I've had not only a bad attitude about money, I had a bad attitude about power. You know, power corrupts absolutely. There's something to be said about that. But when people talk about power, I think they think about the power of the aristocrats that I mentioned before, the coercive power of government. Power is, you know, think of a power tool. It's a tool, and any tool can be used constructively or destructively. And so there is the coercive, destructive power of government, but there's also consensual power. There is the power to do things, and money is the means to do that. Because when you offer somebody money, if I offer Beetle $1 million to clean my shoes, you know, maybe Beetle doesn't want to clean shoes, but he wants the $1 million, so maybe he'll consider cleaning shoes for $1 million. The point of this is this very silly transaction. The point of this transaction is that it's voluntary. I don't point a gun at Beetle and say, clean my shoes, motherfucker. I offer him something. I can't pry his wallet open, or I could, but it would be unethical. I don't pry his wallet open. I don't take from him by force. I offer him a voluntary, persuasive incentive to do what I want. So this is the distinguishing characteristic of money. It is the voluntary exercise of power. It is the incentive to induce people to cooperate voluntarily, to achieve enormous things that you can't do as an individual. Large corporations, division of labor, everything the economists will tell you about. Money makes it happen, and it makes it happen voluntarily. Money is the grease of the voluntary system. This is ethical. It's moral. It is a palpable, positive good over the coercive alternative. Does that make sense? Okay? One more thing. So, if you believe in the virtue of selfishness, you don't need any of these other arguments. That's enough. It is right and proper for you to maximize your own value. Second, money is the voluntary way of organizing large endeavors on a social scale. The alternative is coercion, and we know where that leads. There's one other thing I want to suggest to you. I don't know how much time I have, but one other thing I want to suggest to you, and that is that the amassing of wealth in and of itself is a positive social good. Now, I'm not a socialist, so I don't want to sit here and tell you that because it's good for society for people to become wealthy, you should. But it is an interesting and I think not coincidental aspect of the voluntary nature of money that it is actually the best thing for society for individuals to become as wealthy as they possibly can. How many people have seen the movie Contact? Carl Sagan's book, Contact. Has anybody seen this movie? Bad example. In this movie, space aliens contact the Earth, they send a message, and the telescopes receive the message, and the message is instructions for building a machine. And the machine, we're not sure exactly what it does, but obviously it helps us communicate with, or maybe travel to, or something to connect with the aliens. But it's very expensive. It's this gigantic thing, and so of course the governments of the world get together and they build this enormous machine to contact the aliens. But of course it's governments, so it's a political thing, and the wrong people get involved, and instead of having the best scientists involved in going and contacting aliens, you get the politically connected guys, and instead of having the best construction crews working, the construction gets awarded to the friends of the politicians and so on, and everything possibly can go wrong goes wrong, and they turn the thing on, and I don't remember exactly what happens, the people disappear, or everybody dies, I don't know, but it doesn't work. And it's a big disaster, everybody's disappointed, oh no. But then it turns out there's an announcement that some ultra-rich billionaire from Asia has built his own. He followed the same instructions, and he built his own. He didn't have to get approval, he didn't have to go through a political process, he didn't have to worry about the cousin of the nephew of the president or whatever. He just built it. He didn't ask for permission, he just did it. Instead of asking for the checks, he just wrote it. And he got the best scientists to make the contact, and everybody lived happily ever after. The point of the story is that progress, new technologies, take capital. It's a very simple point. If you're going to build a gigantic machine that changes the world, or a new economic system, or a new business idea, a new concept in shoes or something, whatever it is, if you're going to participate in progress, in making things better, a better mousetrap, a better car, a better airplane, anything, you need capital to do this. And everybody benefits. When we have cheap economic air travel that makes it possible for us all to be here from all around the world, this makes the world a better place. Humanity, brotherly love, all this stuff benefits because of the capital that was invested by entrepreneurs. And this took wealth. This didn't take peanuts, spare change. It took real wealth to do this. So, my encouragement to socialists is that you should become filthy, stinking rich and realize that it doesn't smell so bad, because this is the way to maximize your social good. This is maybe sauce for the goose, because I think actually Ayn Rand's starting argument is sufficient. You don't need anybody's permission. Papa Lobo, as my students call me, gives you permission. Paul, you can go get filthy, stinking rich tomorrow. I give you permission. You don't need my permission, okay? Maybe St. Ayn gave us all permission to be selfish enough to go and get rich. But I'm also telling you that this is good for society. It's good for you. It's good for society. This is no coincidence. Ayn Rand wrote about this, and she defended selfishness in its own right, not because of the social good, but she pointed out it's not coincidence that this is the social good, because the alternatives, the coercive alternatives, are destructive. This is the way it goes. Okay, so that's the argument. That's the theory. Okay, let's talk about practice for a little bit. How do you get really, really wealthy? Let's forget the FSR model, the former Soviet Republic model of filthy, stinking rich. No, we're talking about the creative, positive good of getting really wealthy. How do we get really wealthy?
Print money.
Print money. No, that makes everybody less wealthy. Okay. There are several paths to making money, but really to get a lot of money, to amass a lot of wealth, you can't just go and get a job. To get a job is a good starting place. You need starting capital. You need something. If you have nothing, you have no money, if you're a student just getting out of university or whatever, yeah, you probably need to get a job and start accumulating capital. But to have a job is not the way to get rich. Even the highest paid jobs in the world, as a paycheck, you're never going to get more than 6 figures. And that's not, inflation adjusted, that's not a lot of money. Okay? So the next step up from having a job is to be a business owner. Have your own business. And if your business is successful, you can make a lot of money. And that's good. I'm not saying anything bad about being an entrepreneur and starting your own business. The problem with starting your own business, though, is it's a lot of work. You've got buildings and employees and regulators and headaches and all these things to deal with. And if it's successful, you can make some good money, maybe more even than as an employee. But you have a lot of work to do. And I'm kind of lazy, It's okay, work is fine. But I'd much rather make money with less work if I can. So from having a job to being a business owner, the next step up, I'm elevating it here. The next step up is to be an investor. And as an investor, money works for you instead of you working for money. Now, if you make bad investments, it doesn't work real well. If you make good investments, though, your money makes more money. As my daughter Osivi says, oh, those little baby dollars are so cute. They're so cute. Yeah, make little baby dollars. And I tell her that when we go shopping and she wants something, and I'm like, well, every dollar I spend now isn't going to make little baby dollars for us. They're so cute. Oh, okay. So being an investor is really the way to start accumulating real wealth. Making your little money grow into big money. It's awesome to watch your little dollars grow up. And the most leveraged way to be an investor is to be a speculator. Those evil speculators are actually, I think, the pinnacle of human society, because they amass huge amounts of wealth and do great social good with it. And they do it by pure balls and intelligence. They challenge the market. To be a speculator, to be a really leveraged investor, what do? You buy low and sell high. You don't necessarily try to build a business. You don't put bricks together. You don't hire people. You see something that's cheap, you buy it, and then when things equalize and it goes up, you sell it. You buy low, sell high. This is the essence of speculating. Sounds very simple, but it's hard to do. How do you buy low? You have to buy what other people are selling. They don't want it. If everybody else is buying it, it's high. The price is up. So that means you have to have courage. You have to be willing to look at the market and what is being offered and say, you know what, this is a stupid price. This has to go up. Now, in a truly free market, this is very difficult to do. What makes you smarter than anybody else? Everybody is participating and looking at prices. In a truly free market, it would be very difficult to be a successful speculator. But fortunately, lucky us, we live in a government-run world. And governments excel at screwing up markets and creating distortions. And this is what my boss calls the essence of speculation, is to look at government distortions in the marketplace, predict the outcome, because government distortions have very predictable outcomes. So this idea that the speculator is taking these enormous risks, well, in a totally free market he would be. He'd be basically a venture capitalist. And that is very risky. But in our world, we have the fortune of having really screwed up governments doing really, really obviously stupid things that have economic consequences. Just for example, the financial debacle that's been discussed this morning. If it's true that governments are creating trillions and trillions of currency units in response to the crisis, if it's true, maybe it's true. If this is true, this has consequences. It has economic consequences. It has investment consequences, such as what?
Gold price.
Gold price. Commodities in general, but gold in specific. And we've seen this already. So, this is how you buy low, sell high. Now, is gold low? Well, not compared to where it was 10 years ago. The gold bottomed in late 2001 at $258 or something like that. And it's now close to 2,000. It's pulled back a little bit lately. But a 10 to 1 rise, pretty much almost, or maybe 8 or 9 to 1 in the last 10 years. Is that buying low? It's hard to make that argument. But since 2008, the US government alone has basically tripled its money supply. Has gold tripled since 2008? No. There's still upside there, right? And there are a lot of other examples we could get into, but this is the essence of what I want to communicate. I want to give you permission, Papa Lobo blesses you, to go out there and get beautifully, creatively rich. And the really leveraged way to do this is to invest and to speculate, but not just on wild guesses or crazy ideas. Look at what's going on in the world. Look at what you know. And I know this is going to happen. Or this, we talked about, well, how do we fix the financial crisis this morning? And our last speaker said, well, on that happy note, well, there is no solution. Remember the Economist cover page? That is the situation. There is no political solution. It is impossible for the politicians in the United States to embrace the pain necessary to say, you know what, the market needs to liquidate our mistakes. It is not going to happen. It is not politically viable. That being the case, the train wreck continues. That being the case, the dollar continues to go down the toilet. And you can say, okay, the dollar's worth 1% of what it was in 1900, 100 years ago. I'm getting the hook here. So if the dollar is worth only 1% of what it was, that's really low. The dollar is low. How can it go lower? It's 1%. Well, you know what? Things can go to 0. 0 is infinitely lower than 1%. And you can bet on a drop. And you can make money on something going down. The trick is not that something has to go up, but whether it goes up or down, the trick is knowing which way it's going. And you can do this. And I encourage you to do this. I bless you, my sons and daughters. Go out there and become beautifully, wonderfully, creatively, powerfully rich. Thank you very much.